Thank you, Nicholas Economou, and I would like to mention that it's an excellent conference until now. I'm learning a lot of things, and I really appreciate that the artificial intelligence and the rule of law roundtable managed to have to become an annual event, and that we're collaborating with the European Parliament every time. So thank you for that. And I want also to welcome Robert Silvers, the Undersecretary for Policy, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. I was recently in the US, and finally, I think we can also physically manage to meet at some point. And I really appreciate that you have the passion to accelerate things. And I'm happy that we talk about building bridges again with the EU. And under the light of the TTC, the Trade and Technology Council, I think it's very important that we're discussing today. Since you have actually been now part of this amazing artificial intelligence strategy that we're trying to collaborate on, and you have already developed, I would like to immediately ask you, you have this strategy published a year ago, and I understand that you've already started developing this strategy. So probably you are understanding what are the major considerations of these developments, and I would like to ask you if you could highlight some, because now we are also working on the Artificial Intelligence Act, and it would be great to learn from each other.
Absolutely. Well, Eva, thank you very much. It's great to be here with you today, and I want to just take a moment to thank Nicholas Economou and the team for, again, convening a wonderful event this year on AI and the rule of law. I'm honored to be a part of it. Eva, that's right. I'm very proud of the leadership on AI governance that the Department of Homeland Security in the United States has shown with respect to our department's use of artificial intelligence. And, you know, we are the largest law enforcement agency in the United States. We have tens of thousands of law enforcement officers spread around the country, and have tremendous responsibility with a public safety mission. But that also brings tremendous public responsibility to carry out that law enforcement mission in a way that is consistent with our democratic values, consistent with our laws, consistent with civil rights and civil liberties, and our respect for privacy in this country. And what we along with so many others on this call, admire the incredible potential of artificial intelligence to advance business objectives, government objectives, civil society objectives. It is not lost on us at the same time, however, that AI is one of those technologies that is so very powerful that it has to be harnessed with safeguards. It has to be harnessed in a way that is consistent with the rule of law and who we are. And so we developed an artificial intelligence strategy that provides a framework for us to incorporate the advantages of artificial intelligence for our varied missions, but also does it with respect for those things. And we did that very collaboratively. We worked with the OECD, which obviously has been a thought leader in terms of AI governance. We did it together with Georgetown University, collaborating with them, with our own Department of Defense in the United States, and other civil society stakeholders to inform a document that allows us to use AI in a way that is accountable, transparent, and we hope a model for other organizations in the United States and other organizations in the world.
I think we also agree into calling for a trustworthy AI, and I think this already shows that we are heading towards the right direction. At the same time, again, because you have already developed and understanding the impact of your strategy, since we know it presents significant opportunities to enhance our lives, but also it comes with risk in several applications, and we try to define what high risk is here. So given the breadth of the Homeland Security mission and the large amounts of US and foreign persons with which you interact every day, how can you combine and address public trust in DHS use of AI?
Absolutely. AI, our populations need to feel that AI is being used for their benefit. They need to feel that it is a technology that is advancing their humanity, advancing their personal goals, their livelihoods, and not a tool that is a tool of oppression or something that they have to work through in order to realize the dignity to which they're entitled as citizens of a democratic society. And some of the risks include risks to privacy, for example. Use of AI is incredibly data intensive, also often personal data intensive. And we have to create appropriate rules of the road to have the data available to train AI through machine learning and other techniques, but that has to be done in a way that is privacy protective. So that's one that's one piece of it. Another is there's a security element to it. Often the data sets used to train AI are filled with sensitive data that could be of interest to an adversary, an attacker. Whether criminal or a hostile nation state, and we need to have a protective security architecture around it to make sure that we're protecting people's data or businesses' data that we're entrusted with. We also need to, on the other side of security, understand there may be people who try to manipulate a data pool, what we call AI poisoning, to try to skew algorithmic decision making or the impacts of the machine learning process. And so we need to be protective there. And then I'd say overarching, especially when in a position of government, Eva, we are both public servants within our respective systems, and we have a responsibility to ensure that the ultimate uses that our governments make of artificial intelligence are worthy of the constitutions and laws and regulations that govern us. And that includes our character as democracies that respect individual rights, and that includes freedom from discrimination, for example. We're all aware of the risk of bias in algorithmic decision making, and we have a special responsibility to ensure that our use of advanced technologies is not adversely impacting communities of color, women, or other historically disadvantaged communities. We need to harness this technology to overcome those kinds of historical imbalances rather than perpetuate them.
Robert, again, I understand from what you're saying that we agree that like-minded countries and democracies, they have high in priority the best of their citizens and how to protect human rights in their translation to the digital rights. So this is a priority. So we don't have to have one or the other, choose safety or privacy. We can combine both. But now that we've spoken about the US approach to AI, I would also like to shift the conversation to talk about the transatlantic opportunities that we have. And with your experience in what areas of AI policy do you see a convergence between US and EU and the different approaches, and where do you see divergence? And after you identify that, also I would love to hear your opinion on how we can better partner to build on these convergences and address these divergences.
Well, thank you, Eva. I think it's really important to step back and recognize at the outset that the areas of convergence are so much bigger than the areas of divergence. The areas of divergence, as in so many issue sets between the United States of Europe, are the types of disagreements that happen within families or between friends. They exist and they get worked through, but they don't subsume or dominate the overall relationship. We have a lot that binds us, and I think that's true in artificial intelligence as well. In Europe and in the United States, we are democratic societies that respect personal rights. We think governments should exist to serve the people, and that individual rights are sacrosanct. And I think both our approaches for artificial intelligence incorporate that. And I think that's a huge area for convergence. And then operationally, I think that and tactically, I think that there are many areas where we can work together. For example, on joint research and development, on joint development of policies, with respect to AI, the developing field of AI ethics and governance. I think there is a lot we can work on to address some of the values that you and I addressed just a couple minutes ago. And so I really think that there's a tremendous opportunity, some of it unglamorous. Very important is the field of international standard setting on technology matters. And it's important that the United States and Europe really link arms, particularly as regimes that are more autocratic, that do not share our values, like China, like Russia, like others, flood those standard-setting bodies with their own representatives to try to shape the rules of the road for the 21st and even 22nd century to their shaping, and I think we need to shape it together.
So this is very optimistic, and I think we should rush, because under this current administration, I see huge opportunities of collaboration. And since we are now building the framework for the internet, I think it's essential to accelerate. And on one topic that we would all agree is that AI must be used consistent with democratic values, as you mentioned. However, this sentiment, again, you mentioned China, is not shared by also other countries in the world. What do you see as the biggest threat to the democratic use of AI around the world? And do you believe through this international standards discussion that we should perhaps explore even more in our collaboration? We try to do that in the European Parliament with international organizations. Do you think we can influence non-like-minded countries? And again, what is the main threat to ensure that we protect our democracies from?
I think the main threat is a threat that some countries may try to raise the dignity of the algorithm over the dignity of the human, and that they will try to automate too much of our society and too many decisions that we as citizens and people are entitled to have made in a thoughtful way, where we feel we have due process and fairness and accountability and transparency attached to the decisions that affect our lives. And to be clear, there are massive, amazing benefits to automating all kinds of processes. I don't mean to throw cold water on that, but I also think we need to be very thoughtful about when certain kinds of decisions need to have a human in the loop. I think it's one thing to have a song recommended for you on a streaming service based on what you previously listened to in an automated way. I think it's another to have a credit decision made for you. I think it's another to have a job decision, a career ambition made for you without giving you the right opportunity to compete based on your merits. I worry particularly, Ava, about the rights of the historically disadvantaged. There are people who may not have had the opportunity to attend a full course of formal university studies, but who learned tremendous skills on their own. And I think if we're going to, we need to have algorithms and processes that can account for those divergent experiences, so that we're elevating those who have pulled themselves up through hard work, despite the difficult circumstances, as opposed to knocking them down because they don't come from a traditional pathway that is recognized. And so I think the biggest risk from autocratic regimes like China that are adopting these technologies is that they won't be done in a human-centric way, and that it will perpetuate autocratic values instead of democratic values.
Robert, do you also think, so we had the US a few weeks ago, actually, they decided as not being part of the EU to have an AI strategy that would not have human oversight. And we saw an example of applying AI for a grading system at a school or university. I cannot recall, but it failed. It basically repeated the biases. It had used to through machine learning to conclude, on some results. And after it failed, basically, we saw that even Boris Johnson himself, he accused the algorithm. So the lack of human oversight would lead us to accuse the algorithm, which is done by humans, that they are not perfect. And you talk about human-centric AI. Do you also consider like human oversight, like having control of artificial intelligence, essential? Because you also understand that this AI as a framework should be accepted by the private sector, by the governments, and we have to make sure that we would not create frictions, which is like what Europe is being accused usually of. So I would love to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, I think that there are, Eva, it's a great point, and I think that it's really important that there be sound governance and oversight practices for any organization that is using AI in a way that really impacts people. And that can include, for example, audits of your AI deployments, so that you're periodically testing the results on the back end to make sure that the algorithmic outcomes appear fair and aligned with the types of business rules that your organization would want to have if it had a human doing that work. And you can gain, when you start doing that over statistically significant samples, you can gain enough confidence to then perhaps allow further automated decision-making to take place without as much human review. But it's important to have those kinds of processes. It's just basic quality assurance, but it's quality assurance in a way that impacts people with incredibly consequential moments of their lives. Similarly, on the front end, are the data sets that you're feeding into a machine learning process sufficiently representative? Are they racially and ethnically diverse? Are they gender diverse? Are they diverse of those who have certain disabilities or other characteristics, to make sure that you aren't unintentionally creating unfair algorithmic outcomes? And so, I'm glad that those who carried out that experiment realized that it did not work. I mean, that's okay. There's, trial and error is going to be a part of this. The point is to continually be assessing whether it works.
Well, basically, testing and having sandboxes until we give up control on several levels, it could be very interesting. So I keep that note. I think it's very important also for our upcoming legislative initiative. But one of the other issues that we are facing here, and I would love to hear your point of view, again, since we need to set up, since AI is cross-border, we have to agree on basic standards and principles, especially with our US allies. So we are trying to identify high-risk AI, harmful artificial intelligence. Not easy, and we will have more obligations for the ones that they might risk to with their applications. Did you consider having like a model that you would identify this risk? And if you could elaborate on that, I will give you one example: predictive policing and using biometrics to decide if somebody would be included or excluded from a service. Is something we can control in the perhaps in the public sector, but in the private sector should also be a decision to ensure that it would follow our principles. So how would you think of like having a methodology to identify these high risk applications?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important at the outset, at the very front end of any potential deployment of artificial intelligence technology, to have that kind of to have an institutional framework where you are assessing for different kinds of risks. And one thing that I'm very proud of about my organization's approach, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security's approach, is we actually have a dedicated Office of Privacy in this department, and we also have a separate Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. And institutionally, they will be in the decision and policy-making process, reviewing any of those kinds of potential deployments before they are put out to work in the field. And that is a institutionalized a governance framework to make sure that true experts and people who are by statute assigned to weigh in from those perspectives are shaping anything before it's deployed. And that would especially be the case when you start talking about collection of, for example, biometrics or anything like, for example, predictive policing. And listen, we are optimistic that there are plenty of AI technologies that could be extremely helpful to us in our law enforcement mission at the Department of Homeland Security. But it's all going to go through that process to assure it's aligned with our values.
Thank you for giving us these insights. It's really useful. And since we're going to visit very soon US with a mission for the TTC and also for the Science and Technology Committee, I would love to follow up our discussion. And I want to thank you for being today here and for me having the opportunity to have this chat with you. And again, to thank Future Society, Elon Tech Observatory, and UNESCO, and also, of course, Economu. So Robert Silvers, thank you so much, and we'll meet soon.
Thank you for your leadership, Eva.